Hello, everybody. This is Tiffany. I am the founder of Butterfly Visions Project, director of the Speak Up and Inspire series, and I am also an author of Reality Check, a Survivor Story. We are continuing to do our live interviews with the authors that are participating in the Black Love book campaign. So Black Love is an organization that dedicated that is dedicated to feeding the homeless, low income families, and also people that are needing of food and nutritional items. And excuse me, getting tied up, as well as providing toiletries and resources and referrals to services that they may need. So Black Love Charlotte is not only in Charlotte, they are expanding into other cities and other counties because the need to feed low income families and homeless is great in every city. So Black Love is doing a lot in our community, and we are trying to support them through our book sales. So as authors, what we are doing is we are offering our books for the week starting on May 9th, which was last Saturday, until this Saturday, May 16th. And when you purchase a book from one of the authors that is in the campaign, then the proceeds from the book sales are going to Black Love to benefit them and to give them some more donations to help with their mission. So today we are going to be talking to Mr. Dewayne Hinnant about his book, The Ripple Effect. Now, I tagged several people because this is a great book for advocates to read, survivors to read, if you have ever been in a domestic violence situation. I just received a copy of the book yesterday, and I've already started reading it. And because it is May and it's Mental Health Awareness Week, we are going to talk specifically about not just his book and what Dewayne does and his passions, but we're also going to be talking about his views when it comes to the mental part of being a domestic violence victim. So definitely tune in if you are an advocate or if you're a survivor or if you're just someone who is interested in learning more about the effects of domestic violence on victims. So hello, Mr. Dewayne, how are you doing?
I'm doing great this morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm double doing double work right here, talking to you, and I'm also working from home. So thank you for joining us this morning. I know you had to go to work at 12, so I appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. So tell us about you. What is it that you do for your 9 to 5 or your everyday?
My 9 to 5 now is I work from home. I do a lot of call center work, and that's my 9 to 5 right now.
Okay, nice. So I know that you wrote this book about domestic violence and its effects. Were you a victim of domestic violence, or did you experience or witness domestic violence yourself?
I am not a victim of domestic violence. I come from a two-parent family home, so I never saw domestic violence. I never heard about it until I actually started working for the city of Durham and the Human Relations Department. Um, there was a department there that specifically worked with the community, and part of their initiative and part of their sections was to work with domestic violence. I had a director who was a victim of domestic violence, and she wanted to have a meeting of the minds, kind of say, of everybody that domestic violence affected. So she had a task force that brought in everybody within the community. We had the sheriff's department, we had regular police department, we had somebody that worked with the youth from the city of Durham, we had somebody that worked with the Hispanic community, because believe it or not, domestic violence is pretty big in the Hispanic community as well.
Is
And
it
what I know from just working in that, a lot of people don't talk,
right?
um, because fear of police, fear of being deported, or different stereotypes that go along with it. So we had to have someone that spoke on their behalf. So it was a lot of moving parts and a lot of people that was working with it. So once I got involved in that and I was co-chair of that. So once I got involved with that, I saw, we had, cases and files and stuff of people that had been abused and see how to get services for them. So once I saw that, her stories, it made me want to be more active in the community.
Right. Okay. So you went from having no experience with domestic violence to being on this task force. Um, how did that open your eyes to domestic violence? And how did that impact you working on this task force?
Well, the stories I heard were horrible. They were horrible, and it was a lot to digest for someone who didn't know about domestic violence. And when I say didn't know about domestic violence, I literally was totally ignorant to the fact that this was actually going around, uh, uh, and the extent of it. Um, so, and then once you start reading the cases and seeing, how people talk about it, how it started, how it ended, how detailed it was, you start noticing, some other people's relationships.
Hmm.
So when you start noticing people's relationships, you start picking up signs and red flags. Some
Right.
coworkers, some friends, some people that I just generally know that were involved in relationships. I was like, man, this sounds a lot like, this case I saw, this case I read, or this case I heard, by working on the domestic task force. And come to find out, a lot of them were.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. All right. So you were able to hear the stories, and did that have to, at that point, is that when you started thinking about writing this book, or when did the idea of writing the book come in?
Well, one of the ideas of writing the book came when we had our gala. We had a gala, a year-long gala that we invited everybody out to the community. A whole bunch of dignitaries came out, a whole bunch of city people, government people, and I was to close it. I was to do the last closing speech. One of my friends that I usually have look over my speeches and write it, look over my speeches and give me points on it. She called me about 12 o'clock that night. And
Okay.
She said, Dewayne, I really need your help. I really need your help. And I could hear in the background that someone was yelling at her and screaming and stuff like that. She was like, this guy that I'm dating, he's, trying to break in my house. He's trying to get me. And I could hear him banging on the windows, trying to break down the door. And she lived in Wilson. So from
Okay.
Wilson to Durham, that's about an hour. That's about an hour, depending on, how traffic is. It's about an hour drive. So 12 o'clock at night, I had to get up, put clothes on, and meet her somewhere. Try to get to her before something bad really happened to her.
Right.
So that kind of made me start writing the book because the night before I was supposed to speak at the gala, I actually had my experience, trying to help and advocate for someone in domestic violence.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
it didn't become words that I was reading in a file or case notes. It actually became real life.
Okay. Okay. And at that point, that's when you started digging even deeper and then the book. Is that the way it went? Okay. Okay.
Right. Because like I said, once you start researching, once it became real life for me, it was like, wow, do, am I the only one who sees this? Or is it just
Mhm.
like, I know it's a kind of an ignorant thing to think, but it's just like, does anybody else see, what's going on? And then, you looking here lately for me, when I hear the news or read the news, it's like every day I can see a case or I hear a case about domestic violence or
Right.
or abuse.
Mhm.
So then it was like every other day where I would hear a case, and I was just like, wow, it's pretty bad. It's like, well, today a woman was murdered by an ex-husband. They weren't even saying, in the case of domestic disputes or domestic violence,
Right.
woman was murdered or there was a fight that broke out. They weren't even class. They were just classifying it as regular crimes.
Right. Right. You're right. You're right. So now that unfortunately, the awareness in the public sector, when you hear news or radio, is usually around someone like a celebrity or someone well known and so forth, or something that just really attracts the media because it's a high profile person or something like that. So it's really, when it comes to domestic violence, there is a bigger awareness now because we've had several incidences with celebrities who have been charged with domestic violence or battery or assault or something. Um, that's unfortunate, but it is fortunate because at least it is raising awareness to it. And for someone like you who never experienced it, you're very right. For me, I'm a domestic violence survivor. I had relationship after relationship after relationship that was abusive in some kind of way until I had my children and realized and saw that I didn't want them living in a domestic violence home. And so that's when I had to work on myself mentally to see why it is that I was attracted to these kind of relationships. And that's because it was normal for me. You know, seeing domestic violence or seeing some form of mental or emotional abuse. So from your perspective, now that you are aware of domestic violence, as being an advocate or a survivor of domestic violence, our eyes see things differently. Our lenses are different when we look at relationships. You know, I've talked to a friend of mine who I've tried to tell her over and over again that she's in a domestic violence relationship or marriage, but because she's not being hit, she's not willing to, she's not able to put that the emotional and mental abuse that she's getting from her wife is actually domestic violence. So we do see things from a different lens, especially when we experience it and research it. Um, and I was reading your book and I saw what the purpose of your book is. So what is your purpose? I don't want to read it. I rather you tell us. What was the purpose of you writing The Ripple Effect?
Great. Good question. Let me go back to what you said about relationships, and that's funny because
Okay.
just a note on why I became an advocate too.
Mm-hmm.
Inside information here. People don't know
Okay.
about me. A lot of people that don't know me. I've been
Okay.
married 4 times.
Okay.
Been married 4 times. Every marriage that I've been in had previously their boyfriends or husbands. They're abusive.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
they were abusive.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went back and I took inventory on my relationship, and I was just like, wow, these relationships, and end started out the way that I wanted to, but ended the way that I didn't. So I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, what was going on? Then you start to, add up certain things. You start, like I said, when you start seeing red flags
Yeah.
in relationships, you also start seeing red flags in who the person is too.
That's very true. Mm-hmm.
So what was there was broken trust. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't broken by me. It was broken by whoever abused them.
Right.
So they were violated. So that trust could never be, because they weren't healed from their abusive relationship. It hindered them from, having a healthy relationship with someone else.
Yeah. I agree
So,
with that.
so
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that they, had issues with, or had that they dealt with in their personal life, affected our whole health of our relationship, and ultimately ended. So, like I said, when I take back and I do an inventory on my relationships and how they end and what was the issues or problems with it, you see that as a main stick, of it.
That's very true. That's very true. So I can attest to that. And after, what I just said about being in multiple abusive relationships, um, I always, when I go out into the community and I talk about domestic violence and I talk about my experience, I always make sure that I put the mental health piece in there. Because if you are a victim of domestic violence and you do nothing about it, if the relationship ends and you do nothing about your suffering and your pain and your hurt and what happened in that relationship, then you're going to continue the cycle of being in abusive relationships, or either even if you don't go to another abusive relationship, your psyche and the person that you are has been hurt and damaged. So until you address that relationship, you can't you can't move on and have a healthy relationship if you do not address the abuse that you've been through. Um, so unfortunately, when a woman is able to get away from an abusive partner and then she goes into another relationship, she's carrying the baggage of that abuse. And then she's bringing with her the insecurities that she feels. Um, and when you go through domestic violence, your self-esteem and your sense of self is so damaged and so warped that sometimes it's to the point that you don't even feel that you deserve anything but the abuse. And I went through that. Just feeling as if love was about what I could give, because I was always giving to those abusers that I dealt with, and I was getting abuse in return. So it's like, I'm giving all of this and all I'm getting is abuse. Maybe I don't deserve anything more. So, really addressing the mental piece is really, really important for victims, because you'll never get out of that victim state if you don't mentally address what has happened to you and face the fact that you were a victim, and face the fact that you can't control that other person. You can only control yourself. And controlling yourself means realizing that you're a victim, and realizing that there's also something in you that needs to be healed in order for you to move on and have a successful relationship. That's been my experience, and I think that I can speak for all advocates that you have to have that mental peace in order to move forward in a healthy relationship. So I appreciate you bringing that up. May is mental health awareness. So I think this is perfect to be able to talk to you about your book, because I was looking at chapter 2, waves. So tell us about chapter 2. It's pretty intense, going into that chapter. And I specifically want to talk about one particular piece, but I'm going to let you talk about it first, because you're probably going to say it yourself.
Right. So the reason for chapter 2, and the reason why I put it as chapter 2, is because before the physical abuse happens, the grooming starts happening. The grooming starts happening. The mental abuse starts happening. So I try to stage it out as what a domestic violence relationship would look like from, and this book is actually written from the point of view of me, meaning I was someone who didn't know about domestic violence. So I wrote it as, if you were reading this book and this is your first indication of what domestic violence was, this is what you would see. Right. So first, the second chapter is about the mental part of it. It's about the mental part of it, how it affects you. And I wrote in the book about, what some of the characteristics are of domestic violence. One of the characteristics I wrote, is a theory that I have, not necessarily a theory, but it's just like, I took something from, pop culture, which is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I related it to mental health, and I tied it into domestic violence, because that part about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it is related to, I can only see it as, someone being affected with mental health.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then I related it to domestic violence because I believe that there has to be something wrong. It has to be something wrong for someone that says that they can love you, but also physically abuse you at the same time. So it struck me. It struck a chord with me. It's just like I couldn't rationale me saying I love you and then also beating and hitting and abusing someone that I said that, and for the fact that it also did damage to the other person as well. So when I sat there and I wrote about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it was kind of a personality, someone with borderline personality disorder, because they're horrible in relationships. They do go through extreme highs and lows, which abusers do go through, and also take, the abuse through highs and lows with also. Mm-hmm. So I had to write that in there because it gave some similarity. It gave some characteristics of what someone like I said, if you're a novice about domestic violence, because I also worked in the mental health field too. You would read files about, their totality of their mental health. Mm-hmm. Totality of mental health. You never see what the underlying, trigger was, but I can tell, as reading far back into their files, you see that there was a trauma. They would list that certain traumas that went on in life: sexual assault, rape, domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Those also lend things to like, PTSD, being paranoid, and also physical ailments like anxieties, ulcers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I want to dig a little bit deeper, because I think that this theory on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think that it's right on. Just from thinking of my last abuser, and you have that. Okay, so as a victim, you meet this guy. Okay, he's this great guy. He goes above and beyond for you. One thing about abusers that I have seen time and time again is that they are very charismatic. They know how to get your attention. They know how to suck you in and bring you in. For me, it was, taking me on trips, buying me things, spoiling me, being a gentleman. And one thing that I said I will never ever do in my life is when a man asks a woman, "What are you looking for?" and she gives you that list of things that she's looking for. And I swear to God, this man checked off everything on my list. And I thought it was because he loved me, but it was the way that he kept my attention and really got me to trust him. But then soon I started seeing things like he would get mad and punch the wall, or when we were out, that we one time we were at a car wash and the guy did not clean his rims right, and he yelled. I thought he was going to pummel this man over his tire. But see, he would always explode with other people and not with me. But when he first exploded at me, he hit the wall, just missing my face. And then the next day, he brought me flowers and a bracelet. And, I'm sorry. And, I was just angry. I would never hit you, so forth and so on. And he kept his word. He never hit me, but he did things to me like that were very, can't even think of the word, intimidating, like the punching the wall and dismissing my face, or locking me in the bedroom, not letting me leave. I had to call the police because he wouldn't let me leave the house. So it was like the makeup and breakup. It happens continuously throughout your relationship, and the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the same thing. You saw both sides of him. So I want you to talk a little bit more about the characters and how you relate them to domestic violence.
Well, I relate them because what I know about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is that he suffered from, pretty much split personality, pretty much a split personality. The only way that he could control it was with the serum.
Right.
Was with the serum. He can only control it with the serum, and the Dr. Hyde part was the one who was going out there killing prostitutes and stuff like that, and he was doing all this, mischievous stuff until he couldn't anymore. And I think at the end of the book, he actually kills himself from it. I talk about in the book that there really is no Dr. Jekyll. It's really Mr. Hyde. He is the dominant personality. Mm-hmm. He just has a facade that covers it up. Right. And with a lot of abusers, that dominant personality is the abusive personality. Abusive personality, but he has a cover for it. Only because he wants to suck whoever he's dating or who's married to in. And one of my a seminar that I was going to do, I did a cycle of violence. Cycle of violence was, the honeymoon stage, the possessive stage, the stalking stage, the threatening stage, threatening and intimidation stage, and the violence. And then I said it starts all over again. Mm-hmm. Once those stages are complete, he starts all over again with the honeymoon stage, which is where he buys you flowers, buys you gifts, tells you that he's sorry, the apologies and stuff like that. And once he gets you sucked back in, that's when the abuse continues to start all over again. So you go through that cycle. You maybe even go through that cycle even in a day. Some people go through it daily, that same cycle where it's honeymoon, possessiveness, stalkingness, threats, and abuse all in one day.
Yeah, you're right. That does happen. For me, what attracted me to this book is that it's coming from a male's perspective. Have you found that this book has been helpful for men to understand domestic violence more?
Well, I find that those are my target audience would be, the female aspect, because I even wrote the book and I say she, he, I use pronouns like he, she, only because 90% of abusers look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I thought that it would be helpful that I wrote it, and I wrote it with those pronouns, is that the guy that's on the back of the book is someone that's advocating for you. He's not the one that's abusing you. He's advocating for you.
Right.
So it's not that when I talk to a lot of men and I tell them, you know, a lot of the people who bought my book, the first part, were a lot of men.
Right.
Were a lot of men, and a lot of men who had daughters,
right,
or who had sisters. And so how did I explain this to them? I was like, you know, when you read this book, I want you to think about, you know, your daughter, your sister, your aunt, your mother. Think about it when you read this book.
Right.
Because one of the lines that I said one of the lines I wrote on the book, I said, domestic violence runs the gambit. It doesn't care about if you're rich or if you're poor, black, white. It doesn't care. Even if you're male or female, it doesn't care. Domestic violence can happen to anyone.
Right. Yes. I really do appreciate the fact that you wrote this, and just reading it, I feel as if you were talking to me. So the way that you wrote it, for me, it's like a direct, I'm talking to you through my book. I didn't ask you this before. What is the ripple effect? So I'm gonna go backwards and then go back forward. What's the ripple effect?
Yeah, I'm going to read my first portion from the first chapter.
Okay.
And it's a quote from the first chapter. So this is the encompass of what I think the ripple effect is for my book.
Okay.
And it's the idea that everything is purposeful really changes the way you live. To think that everything that you do has a ripple effect. That every word that you speak, every action that you make affects other people and the planet. So that's what I think that encompasses my whole book. Because even though you think that you can't affect domestic violence and advocating for it, you can. And that's the reason why I tie so many other issues or so many other segments into domestic violence. Because everyone has a purpose in this. Everyone has a part to play in this. If we want to really eradicate it, everybody has to take up and say, you know what? What am I doing to effectively make change as far as that? What am I doing to try to reduce the numbers of it?
Right.
So that's the reason why I tied everything pretty much together. You know, I write about stuff that's in there. And I also, if you read the book, I write about a subject or topic, and then I have the ripple effect behind it. So what's the ripple effect that comes to it? The ripple effect that I have in this is that, you know, if you're talking about mental illness or mental health, the ripple effect is that it's like being poisoned slowly. Because the horrible relationship that you had with your abuser can also make you have horrible relationships with other people. That's true. Other aspects of your life. So the metaphor that I use with poisoning is because being slowly poisoned doesn't kill you quickly. I mean, it doesn't kill you quickly. It kills you slowly. So it starts killing off, you know, other, you know, organs and stuff like that in your body, and slowly you die from it.
Right.
You die from the effect of it. And I also talk about toxicity.
Right.
Not only do you become poisoned, but you also poison and make other people toxic too. So you have a toxic relationship, you know, with other people. Your trust is broken. So how can you trust if your most person that's in your corner, loving you, does that to you? How are you going to effectively have a trusting relationship with anyone else? If this person right here is supposed to love me no matter what, care for me, take care of me, how can I have a trusting relationship when that trust has been broken or violated?
Right. I see in here where you were talking about the poison, like you just said. And then I also see here that you said that domestic violence can affect a woman's judgment and impair her mind. The abuse can associate a misunderstanding as lying or connect an act of anger or displeasure as foreshadowing to domestic violence. Once out of that relationship, they're left with raw and exposed emotions. So I want to talk about that for a second. And your views on what happens after the relationship to the woman. What's the effect to a woman after the relationship ends? If she gets out safely, what are the effects that come from that when that relationship is over.
Right. So one of them, just on my personal relationships that I
Mm-hmm.
know, um, my wife that I have now, she told me when I first met, she said that, this couldn't be true. That this guy couldn't be so nice to me. She
Mm-hmm.
was like, I can't believe that this guy's so nice. He's, pretty much, and the when we first started out, our view on our relationship were totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was dating her, and I had no expectations as far as a relationship because of my past relationship. So I was dating her. I was dating her and dating her, and I felt like what she said to me was, she said, you were so loving. She was like, but a loving guy, you feel like this. You feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yes.
You always feel like you're always feeling like you're waiting for the shoe to drop. And I was just being my regular same person. I come
Mm-hmm.
from a family of five. I have three sisters
Mm-hmm.
and one brother. And my sisters are two of my sisters and my brother. They're all old enough to be my parents.
Okay.
So I have high regard and high revere for my two sisters because they were like my mother.
Right.
As far as that, it was just like having a second set of parents that lived in the house with you. It was just like,
Yeah.
you can't do anything wrong. So
Yeah.
it's like, and then my sisters, they were so, so, how can I say it? They were so motivated in their life and stuff. So it was like I had a high regard for, respecting women, and then too, I have three daughters.
Okay.
I have three daughters. And I tell you that having a daughter changes your life and changes your perspective on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
I've heard that from a lot
Everyone
of
you
men.
see as a potential threat. You see
Yes.
everyone as a potential threat.
Yes.
So it's like, you look at everybody cross-eyed or funny looking. It's like, all right, who's this person that's coming around here? Or
Yeah.
who's the person that she's talking to on the phone? So it's like I couldn't see, you know, any woman that was in my life as being a victim or being, abused and stuff like that. So I always protected it. I always guarded it. And I always, tried to not abuse people that I love, because like I said, I put myself in, somebody else's shoes. This is somebody's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
someone's daughter, someone's granddaughter, someone's sister, maybe
Yeah.
someone's, only child.
Right.
So I
Right.
couldn't see myself as putting someone in that. So when I say that, it breaks down, and poisons and impairs judgment, is because the trust is broken.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you sit here, one of the lines that I put in my book is that now she's faced with the harsh reality that the entire relationship has been a facade.
Yes.
So if you've been lied to your whole relationship and you thought that this person was the best thing, he turned out to be the worst thing,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna be guarded. You're gonna have walls up.
Very.
You're gonna have walls up. You're gonna have, different kind of reactions to your everyday relationship. So it's
Very.
gonna feel like you're waiting for the shoe to drop, because it's like, okay, this feels familiar, and
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of familiar is purpose. That's the reason why the abuser did it. He wants you to feel like that.
Right.
He wants you to feel like every relationship could be that.
That's very true. That's very true. I was single for about, let me see, 8 years, 7, 8 years, after leaving my former abusive relationship, my last abusive relationship. And yeah, especially right after, I always encourage women in the shelters that I go and talk to, that when you get out of the shelter, that the journey is not over. The healing is not over. You're now in a situation where you're not in that shelter under the care of social workers and caseworkers and psychologists and advocates. Now you're on your own. So then what? You don't go jump into another relationship. You still continue to work on you until you have learned that not all men are abusers, which takes time to learn. But you have a new sense of self after going through domestic violence. You have to recreate yourself, because you have to learn to trust again. You have to learn to love again. And you have to learn how to listen to that voice in the back of your head that says that something is wrong. Listen to it. Because if you feel any inkling that something is wrong, usually something is wrong. And you have to, and women have to understand that no matter how good looking this man is, we talk about sex a lot because a lot of relationships and a lot when it comes to intimate relationships has to do with sex. No matter how good the person is, no matter how good the sex is, no matter what he does for you, if he's hurting you every day with his words or with his fist or with his actions, then that's not love. And sometimes victims have to learn over again what love really is because their abuser has made them feel as if love is control. It's not control. Love is the opposite of that. So the healing doesn't stop right after. And it really doesn't, it takes a while. And so I always encourage victims that while they're going through this journey and getting back on their feet, so forth and so on, try not to get into another relationship because you are still not whole. And you know, so a lot of times, even now, I'm married now, I still struggle with trust. I still struggle with seeing things that might look like something that really isn't that something, you know, jumping to conclusions because of what I've been through that now you're going to do this. So it takes a while. And I don't think you ever completely heal because you're always on hyper awareness after domestic violence. You're always hyper aware. You're always hypersensitive. And, you know, it really takes a lot of work on your part as a victim to move to the survivor stage where you're strong enough to be in another healthy relationship because you can turn into the abuser yourself with your words and with your insecurities and with your fear and your pain. You can turn into the abuser to someone else because of you haven't healed. You haven't healed yet. So that's my personal take.
Yeah, it is. I also put another metaphor in there that the same tactics that the abuser use are the same tactics that pimps kidnappers use.
Yes.
So a lot of that, like I said, a lot of the things that they do is, like I said, the mental starts first. The mental starts first. And there are some people that's in, I'm not gonna say a domestic violence relationship, but they're in a toxic relationship, they're in an unhealthy relationship, and they don't even know.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people don't know because they don't.
If I say that the tactics that they use, it's kind of like, you know, when I say kidnappers, one of the things they talk about in kidnappers is the Stockholm syndrome. It's like when you love the person that's kidnapping you. This guy's essentially kidnapping you. He's, in some cases, they do hold you, you know, captive in your own home. Don't allow you to see other family members. Don't allow you to see friends.
Isolation.
Like in my book, I even talk about they even, you know, prevent you from working or either create an environment where you can't work. Like in my seminar, I talk about, you know, how rape is a component of domestic violence or domestic abuse.
It is.
I once knew a woman that said that she mentally she was gone because she was pregnant every year. He kept her pregnant every year just to keep her home. She was like, I can't do it. She was like, I can't do it. Every year I was always pregnant. He kept me pregnant. And you know, I can't really speak on being pregnant, but I can speak on the different emotions that, you know, a lot of women go through as far as being pregnant. You go through ups and downs. You go through, you know, the baby crying. You're not getting enough sleep deprivation. You go through the baby blues. You go through a lot of emotions that can take a toll on your mental health. So the fact that this person was keeping this woman pregnant year after year after year just so he could keep her home.
I can't imagine dealing with pregnancy, new child, babies, and the abuse. That's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. When I tell you she was fried, when I say fried, meaning that she, you know, she was on autopilot. Like her life consisted of, getting up, fixing, bottles, taking care of the kids, starting it all over again. She couldn't process anything. She couldn't process anything else outside of that. She, I mean, but that was her life. That was her life. She was such a cycle in a loop that when it came to, just being out, it was just like a new experience. And it was just like, once she figured out that, I'm in a loop, I'm in a cycle, and he's keeping me in this cycle. He's keeping me in this loop. That it was like, okay, I got to get out.
Yeah. So how do you, and I'm just looking at the chapters in your book, how do you redirect the ripple? How does someone do that?
How do you redirect the ripple? So the ripple in my book is everything that happens from the domestic violence. Domestic violence in every aspect of it. Like I said, I go through and I start talking about, small ripples, big ripples. Each chapter is laid out as far as, a ripple or a wave, something water related. So how do you redirect, a wave whenever they come in? They say they redirect it by, putting up dams and stuff like that. As far as for us, us redirecting the ripple would mean that we need to have better laws. We need to have better understanding. We need to have better support. That's really how you redirect the ripple,
right?
Because you take away the stigma associated with it. So it's not that you can't turn to someone, because that's the whole objective to not the whole objective, but that's one of the key objectives in domestic violence is cutting you off, not having a support group that you can turn to, that you can run to. So you take away the stigma, you take away the stigma of domestic violence or domestic abuse, and then there is someone that you can turn to. Then you're redirecting the ripple itself.
Right. Very good. Well, I think that I've already read chapter 1 and 2, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. How can someone find your book, or how can someone get your book?
You can reach me on Facebook at C. Dewayne Hinnant. You can reach me on Instagram as well at C. Dewayne Hinnant. You can also reach my website. It's on the C. Dewayne Hinnant as well. Look for me doing, events as far as Block Love. I'm also doing an event with you and, a back to school event in August. I'm doing a gala for someone else, for Vanita Howard in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm speaking at her gala. And look for me. You can also see me doing seminars and stuff like that. And the next seminar that I plan on doing is the relation between homelessness and domestic violence. That was actually supposed to come out in February, but because of the virus, I didn't have, and I was actually doing it at a shelter. So I was going to work on that. So I'm trying to see if I can either do it as a live or as a Zoom meeting. But I'll probably end up doing it as just a regular seminar.
Gotcha.
A lot of the topics that I talk about are just certain key issues that people don't relate to domestic violence. Like one section in my book is talking about church hurt.
Okay.
So I talk about how domestic violence is a secret, really a secret in church. A lot of people don't talk about it. You have a lot of people that's in churches, that's hiding the fact that they're abusers, but they're also, preaching and stuff like that.
Right. Yes, that's definitely a thing. Yes. Okay. Well, you have a lot of good things that are coming up. If I wanted to get your book, where would I go?
You can go to Amazon. Look for The Ripple Effect, The Lasting Effects of Domestic Violence, or type in my name, C. Dewayne Hinnant. A lot of if you read my book, if you haven't completely read my book, and the reason why I'm glad that you brought up the mental health, and I'm glad we're doing this initiative for Block Love, is because domestic violence and homelessness does affect a lot of people. Like in my seminar, I wrote one of the research numbers that I picked was it said that 34% of women who are homeless because of domestic violence.
Okay, gotcha.
They're homeless because of domestic violence. Before I even related the two in writing this book, I thought about I'm writing this book from my standpoint as someone who doesn't know, who didn't know. I wrote it on the point of actually, if you want to make an outreach program, you could use this as your foundation. And I also wrote in the back of it, there's a portion called emergency. Emergency is an escape plan. That's at the end of the book. It tells you how you can leave your abusive relationship if you're in an
Okay.
abusive relationship.
Okay.
So if you know people that's in an abusive relationship, I mean, the book is designed for that. It's designed for everything that I talked about, but it's also designed to be that you can slide and give to someone who's in an abusive relationship, because it's very thin, it's very compact, but it's a whole lot. It's a lot of knowledge that's in there. It's a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you can find out. So it's not written to where an abuser will pick up and be like, oh, okay, were you trying to get out or you trying to leave? It fits into any pocketbook. It fits into any
Right.
pocket. It fits into any coat pocket.
Right.
The emergency plan that's in the back is definitely for somebody that's trying to leave.
Yes, and I see that. That's what I'm reading right now. Yeah. Yes. So thank you for that. I think that this is definitely a good book to give to someone, especially like myself and many other advocates who work with domestic violence victims on a daily basis. I definitely think that this is something that is a good tool for them, especially when it comes to the emergency kit, understanding abusers, and really seeing that the cycle of abuse that they're in, they might not recognize it as that. But once a person starts to read the cycle of abuse wheel, then it becomes very apparent that there is a cycle. And that cycle usually happens the same exact way. It might be in a different order, but it always gets back to the honeymoon stage, because that's the reason why victims stay. Is because that honeymoon stage, they keep pulling them in, and they might stay in that stage for weeks, for months, until something happens, and then the intimidation happens and the threats happen and the violence happens. So I think that this is definitely a good tool for victims to be able to read. But I think it's also a good tool for people who have had no dealings with domestic violence, have never experienced it, don't know anybody that has. Unfortunately, that is becoming more rare than not, for people to not know anybody or not heard of someone close to them dealing with it. But for someone who hasn't, I think it's definitely a good tool. And especially coming from a man, I think it would be a really good tool for men that are going into relationships with a woman that might have been abused. I think it's a good tool for a lot of different things. So thank you for writing The Ripple Effect. You can get this on Amazon. You can also reach out to see Dewayne Hinnant. Personally, he's very welcoming. He's very willing to talk to you. I approached him and we started talking and got along great. So I think that if you are listening right now and you are looking for tools to give to your victims, or you're looking for tools to share with men that you're in relationships with, this book is a good tool for different uses. And so please check it out on Amazon. You can go in there by his name, not Google, I'm sorry. You can go into Amazon.com, you can search for C. Dewayne Hinnant, or you can search for The Ripple Effect. And let me get the whole name of the book, because I keep saying The Ripple Effect and not the whole thing. So The Ripple Effect, Lasting Effects of Domestic Violence. Get the book. It's very has a lot of information, a lot of good tools, a lot of awareness, a lot of self-awareness, especially for victims. And it's just a very, very well written, very personal book. So thank you, Dewayne, for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. I hope I didn't hold you too much, because it's going on 11:30. We had a good discussion this morning. So thank you again for doing this live with me and being a part of the Black Love Charlotte book campaign. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I really love, working with you. I really love working with all advocates to get this information out. I think it's needed in the community to stop some things, a lot of things. Because when I did the research on the book, you notice that domestic violence is so much related to other issues and stuff like that, that it does have its own ripple effect in domestic violence, but it has this ripple effect in the community. So I wanted to write it. I wanted to be a part of any advocacy. I wanted, when you approach me about it, or emailed me about it, I wanted to be involved in, because like I said, I had done a seminar. I was working on a seminar about homelessness and domestic violence.
Yep.
So right now, I want to say this to everyone that's out there that is in a domestic violence relationship or maybe in a domestic violence relationship. It is definitely not your fault. You can overcome it. Um, that this isn't the way that you're supposed to be treated. You should never feel that you deserve to have someone put their hands on you, someone to abuse you, someone to, take away your life. Think about right now that we're in this state of shelter in place. That there's probably there's somebody that's out there that's sleeping in their car, that's in the shelter, that's homeless because they wanted to, or they had to get away from their abuser, and that was the only way that they could get out.
That's true.
So this book, was written last year, but it's still relatable now, especially right now we're in this virus situation now. So if anybody that think that you're in an abusive relationship, get the book, find out ways to get out. If you're in a person or someone outside and you're seeing that somebody's in an abusive relationship, get the book, point out certain chapters, let them know, show them red flags that this is the same thing that everyone else is going through. It's not just you. You're not supposed to be treated like this. And I wanted to write it just to show effects of it and how it affected the community. I thank you so much, Tiffany. I wrote it because I wanted to be the change that everyone could see.
Thank you. Thank you. Truly appreciate you. I'm sure that those that are watching and will be watching over the next couple of days, I will make sure that you get a copy of this. I think this was a good segue. And thank you, Ms. Deborah, for allowing us to be a part of Black Love Charlotte by donating the proceeds from our book sales to you. So everyone have a great day. Check out the authors for the for the Black Love book campaign. You can see all the authors on my page. We've been sharing them amongst each other's pages. We also have an event going on with all the information for all the authors, including Dewayne. So everyone have a great day, and thank you again, Dewayne, for joining. Bye.